Hi, my name is Zebra. This is going to be a one-take video, and it's going to be very minimally edited. So if there's any mistakes, I'm just going to talk over them. Anyway, the video. This is a video about a very specific alternative to Pitchmap. Pitchmap is an auto-tune plugin that people have been putting on bass sounds to make them have like polyphony, essentially. I'm going to just break down quickly how this works and then show you the two racks. So anyway, Pitchmap is a $400 plugin that takes your input signal and breaks it down to the frequencies of that sound, and then takes those frequencies and will pitch shift them or auto-tune them to the scale that you set it to, I guess. And it's a very cool idea, and it sounds very cool on bass sounds. Of course, it's very much not accessible to most people since they don't want to throw $400 at an auto-tune plugin. So let's just start this out by taking some VR samples because, as you know, these are like high quality bass sounds and I don't have to sound design in front of camera. So let's just take a one shot and then maybe, why not? We'll just do that and then one more. Right there, just so we have a variety of sounds to throw at it. So let's start with the first rack. This rack is very simple. This requires a linear phase EQ and something that can flip the polarity of some sound that you give it. So let's just say you do not need a Pro Q3 for this tutorial. I'm using it because it's very easy to do what I'm going to do. There are many free linear phase EQ plugins out there that I'm sure you could get your hands on without paying lots of money, because I am aware that Pro Q3 costs like $170. So let's just open up this rack real quick. This is a utility that will flip the polarity of your sound, and this is the EQs, and let's just show you how these sound, and then I'll explain why this is arranged like this. So as normally Pitchmap will work, it will take your sound and then kind of put it into a key that you give it. This is done by phase cancellation, or not, yeah, phase cancellation, that is correct. So I'm gonna disable all of that, so I can just show you. This utility on top of the dry signal will create what you call like a null, like a null test, for like when you have two of the opposite polarity, like they just cancel out because two of the opposite pressures will give you the zero pressure. Not zero pressure, but difference in pressure. Sorry. This is useful though, because if you make any modification to a sound, like any difference in one of them but not the other, then it would only subtract the things that are the same but opposite. So for example, if I was to put like a bell curve EQ, like right at that frequency, you're only going to hear how, like, what the EQ is modifying. So for example, of course, you also hear, like, so you hear, obviously, the boosted frequencies, but you also hear, like, the stuff that gets phase shifted, because this EQ isn't linear phase, which is very important with the EQs, that these stay in linear phase mode. So now let's go into the EQ and see what it's doing. The EQ is essentially just a whole bunch of very high slope, high Q curves that are just taking these specific frequencies that I give it, the scale, and then it's lowering them down by 30 decibels, and then getting layered with the flipped sound. Essentially, you only hear those frequencies. I'm going to make this from scratch just so you can see how you make them. This is just a utility that has flipped polarity. You group this, and then you create a new chain. I'm going to take a instance of Pro Q3 again. You do not need this plugin at all. and I'm going to give it the specific frequencies that I want to give it. In this case, it's going to be a D sharp minor scale, but modified so it doesn't have the 6th degree, because I find that very weird when it comes to like full spectrum sounds, because then you have like constant tritone stuff going on, and I like the 2nd degree scale part of the scale more than the 6th degree of the scale. Anyway, doesn't matter. Make sure these are all bells. Make sure the dB per octave is as high as you can. Crank up the bell, or like the Q of it, and then lower them down. I know it seems like weird to lower instead of like upping it, but this is just to make sure that it doesn't clip in any form of EQ. I don't think this one can actually clip inside the plugin, but outside of it, it definitely can. Make sure that it's in linear phase mode, and then set it to low quality, because the difference between low and high quality isn't very noticeable. Low quality just has more low end than high quality, but it also will save you from using too much CPU than you need to. What I did there is I've just now raised this to where the first EQ stopped having its bands go, because this has a 24 band limit. And then I'm doing the same thing over here, except for the top bit of this, because this now has, like, I think maybe 12 different it's like a few EQs that are stacked on top of that one EQ, and it will just cause too much. So now that's how you create that sound. There's one big distinction between this and actual Pitchmap. The actual Pitchmap plugin will either frequency shift or pitch shift those individual frequencies, essentially sine waves, to the frequency you want. And that's how you get the effect of Pitchmap. This rack right here only isolates the frequencies that you gave it. So yeah. And just to show you, you can just modify the scale here by moving all of these, or just changing the notes of them. So you can make this a chord, or whatever you want to make it. Make sure you highlight all of them. Now, if you don't have Pro Q3, you may have to actually type in the frequency of all of these notes. So you can just do that with like a quick Google search or something. As you see, it's very easy to change the scale of it. Or, alternatively, you can just flatten the track out and then pitch it from there if you need to. Now let's go on to the second rack. Sorry for talking so long about that one. This one is similar idea in terms of concept, except I've just added the second part of what Pitchmap does, or the actual thing. This is a very CPU intensive plugin, or rack, not a plugin, rack. And this uses 42 different individual chains, and each chain has like 2 different chains within it. So then again, don't play this, or don't open this rack while your like DAW is playing audio, because that might take like 10 times longer to open this rack, and it will slow down your computer like insane, because you have to stop the audio and everything. So I'm going to open this and show you how long it takes to open this. The point I'm trying to get across here is that this is a very intense rack, and a lot of slower computers may not be able to run this rack, and so I'm very sorry for those. I'll probably try to figure out a way to minimize it, and then I'll upload like a quick 10-second video saying here's the better rack, and here's how you do it. This should be about done, and then it's going to open like 42 different Pro Q3s. There they are. As you see, these are still isolating specific notes in my scale. For example, A sharp, G sharp, F, D sharp, C sharp. And then there's also these now, which are isolating very specific notes, and these are gonna isolate every note that's outside of the scale that I gave it. So this is gonna be actually very hard to transpose this one form of racks, so I may make a duplicate of it in all the common EDM keys. I do not know. Maybe, maybe not. So just ignoring this insane mess of a rack. What this is, essentially, is the original rack before. As you see, this is very similar to the rack that I just placed earlier, right? Because you have the two chains, one of them with your EQ, and then the other one with your inverse polarity thing. Except this time, I'm isolating a very specific frequency that is not in my scale, and I'm frequency shifting this to the note that I want it to be. Because essentially, this isolated frequency here is a sine wave. And frequency shifting versus pitch shifting a sine wave is very, pretty much the same, except for the fact that pitch is like logarithmic frequency, not logarithmic, exponential frequency. Yeah, that's kind of it. And I just duplicated this like 40-ish times, I think, just to get most of the spectrum out besides the inaudible stuff. And yeah, that's kind of that. I'll show you how this sounds. As you see, this one rack is already making my computer have a CPU overload. I think that's what you call it. And that's very surprising, as I have a i5 processor which isn't slow, and I've already maxed out my buffer size. So this is a very CPU intense one. So what I would recommend you do is actually flatten this thing out and only use it really for sound design. Like, you can just, if you didn't know, I'm pretty sure that freezing it doesn't actually stop you from using CPU or having your CPU go through it, but what it does do is it allows you to flatten it, of course. So you can just duplicate the channel or add a new MIDI track, and then just drag these in. These have Pitchmap on it, and then you can just turn off these these clips. So now you have the same sound, but with no CPU usage, really, just like 2. That's kind of it. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. I will try to answer them. That's kind of it. I might do a follow-up video talking about maybe a more efficient way to do this than having, like, 42 channels of rack. That's kind of it. See ya.